Hello, everyone. This is Pam Nakpil, and this is The Moving Truth with Pam. So I'm excited with my guest today, as I always am with all my guests anyway, but very excited with this one. I met him briefly during a symposium or talk we had. We were both panelists. I was impressed about how much he felt strongly about promoting and, being an immigrant.
Yes.
So it was to talk about immigrants. And I would like himself to introduce himself to you.
Absolutely.
Please, Ivan.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Ivan Okello, and I'm an immigrant to Moncton, but also an immigrant to Canada for 7 years now. And I came and fell in love with this place and decided I wouldn't leave. And my work has been full of supporting other people come here and immigrate and build a new life and make sure that they can succeed and add on to the communities.
That's really something I admired when I met you then, Ivan. So where was home before Canada?
So home for me was Uganda.
Uganda.
And I had lived in Uganda for 25 years. I had never left my motherland whatsoever. I never knew of any other place that you could think of as home.
So it was just,
and so
your
it
world
was just
dead.
like my little universe in one place, and everybody knew me by name. Like I could walk outside of this building and everyone was like, Ivan. and then I moved here and it was
Why?
Well, that's
Why?
a good
What
question.
was the reason? Why? What was the thinking process? I mean, I can imagine you being part of such a rich and familiar community.
Yeah.
So why suddenly Uganda, then Canada?
At the point, it was education.
Okay.
I had gone to university and I'd finished my undergrad in Uganda, but I felt like I wanted something that would challenge me. And a challenge in my mind was something that was completely different from what I was used to.
What was the course you took in Uganda?
So I'd done a Bachelor of Arts in Social Science.
Okay.
And I basically had an interest in community development work, but I felt like I needed to do something different, but also something outside. And I find that so many people were terrified by that idea. And for me, it was actually where it was almost like, wait a moment, no one is going to do this? I'm going to go ahead and do it.
So you're a different thinker.
So in my mind, I was just like, someone has to do this and find out. And for me, in my mind, I was like, if I can find out, then I can send a memo home and say, hey, everyone,
it's okay.
It's okay. It's not so bad. Or you better bring your umbrella if you think it's sunny outside. And it was really that kind of idea that really led me to say, you know what, let's try it out.
But why Canada? Why, I mean, so many countries.
Yes.
Why Canada?
Well, for me, the beauty of it was that when I met with other organizers within post-secondary institutions, Canada seemed to have the program that really, really aligned with my interest. Because at the time, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to become a public servant or become an economist or become a counselor. I wanted something that would give me an appreciation of how the systems work and how it produces a more multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary kind of program. And that's the one that I found out at Dalhousie in Halifax, where I came to. So it was really like that program and that program only, because I had no interest in all these others. And that was really the gateway of me coming to Canada and me pursuing that as a career path.
So you were in Nova Scotia first. Was the intent to stay? Was the intent to study or to be able to stay?
Well, for me, to be honest with you, the intent was to study and actually leave.
Okay.
So it wasn't until the last 2 months after I'd finished my program that the real dilemma of my future now came up. Because as soon as I was in my program, I was 100% focused on completing it, because that was my primary goal at the beginning. I was like, I'm here for this education, and hopefully I can use this education and return value back home. And it was only when I spoke to my family prior to my graduation that we were like, are you coming back in July or not? And now it was already May, and now I had a dilemma on my hands to say,
are you staying?
Am I going to stay, or do I pack up my bags and just move back to Uganda or somewhere else in another part of the world? So it was actually the 2 months before my actual exit that I made up my mind that this might be actually the place to stay.
Okay, so the decision to stay, what helped you decide to stay? Families back home?
Yes.
Why?
Well, at the time, one of the things that I noticed that was actually driving me to return home was that everybody that I knew within my community, within university, was leaving to go back to their home. So they were leaving to go back to Ontario, they were leaving to go back to Vancouver, to go back to Ottawa, some were going back to Iran and Brazil. And in my mind, it was almost like, can I stay in Nova Scotia if everyone that I know is leaving?
Yeah.
And that was when another opportunity came up that I was like, how about I go somewhere new?
Okay.
And somewhere new was New Brunswick at the time.
But this is new for me. Like most of the students I know now,
Yeah.
the intent is to stay,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The intent is to use the educational
Yeah.
pathway to be
Yes.
able to stay. But
Yeah.
those are unique. I mean, not just you, but most of your classmates.
Yes.
I'm hearing from you that are actually leaving.
Yes. And I think that's actually a new reality now that we're witnessing in Canada. That I think back then, the naturalization path from being a student was so guaranteed that it's almost like you have to finish your education, and that education will give you the work experience that you get, and that work experience will give you long-term stability, whether it's for yourself or for family,
Whether it's Canada
whether it's
or
for
somewhere
Canada
else.
or somewhere else. But now we are seeing a change in individual attitudes towards that someone is like, if I'm from Qatar, do I need to stay here for a long time, or do I just go to Qatar? Or there's actually third place immigrants now, and I don't know if you've noticed it, and these are people who would come from Nigeria to Canada, or from Uganda to Canada for school, and go to third location as an immigration destination.
What?
So now
So like, what would those third locations be?
so now it could be moving to Europe, or
Or
it
the
could be
US.
moving to the US, or so it's almost like they have had an immigration experience here, but it's not the permanent destination like we used to think.
So it's just a stepping stone in a
So
way.
it's sometimes a stepping stone, or sometimes it's an acceleration into another destination, and that's because there's a global demand of talent, and
different now.
it's very competitive. If you know, housing or healthcare are becoming challenges within Canada, some newcomers are starting
Sometimes
to think,
you think, okay.
maybe the place is somewhere else.
So, preparing to move here, you make it sound like it was easy.
Oh, it wasn't.
Okay, tell me that bit. Like you said, okay, I'm going, I'm going to try it out. But what was the process? I'm sure it wasn't that easy.
It wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. And in my experience, actually, one of the things that I discovered through the process was the level of paperwork that you had to do.
Oh, wow.
Now, many people think, oh, you need to go to Canada, buy a ticket, and get a visa and go. But there is so much you have to do preparing for before you even get to that airport. And it could be having your finances set up, or being able to get the right documentation, or look for connections to set up housing, or look for space or a city that is actually affordable. And in my case, the one thing that made it easier was that there was another Ugandan living in Halifax at the time that were like, oh, I have a friend that is looking for a roommate in September. So by the time I was on the plane, my accommodation was set up.
It's done.
It's already done. And
So
they
it's
were
good
like,
that you had...
So you really, like, and that was almost by sheer luck, because again, you don't get generosity from strangers that do not know you unless someone is like, you know what, I had a hard time, but I'll make it easier for Pamela. And that for me was the beginning of my drive to help other newcomers, because from that one level of support, it made my entry and participation so much easier. While I could have been looking on Kijiji or Facebook.
Worried for how many months?
Worrying for months and months. And that really gave me an insight also into the fact that Canadians are really, really accommodating people. And but that was something that I had to notice from my own experience, to say, you know what, not everybody might treat you nice, but there's people that still do, and you need to recognize and appreciate those.
The majority instead of the minority.
Instead of the minority.
How was it feel? Because we have a lot of, it's very different, I think 7 years ago, right? Now, how different was the environment then, especially when we talk about racism, not just for people who have black origins, but also for Asians, everything. Like when COVID hit, everyone who looked Chinese was like, okay. How was it then compared to how you're seeing it now?
Well, one thing I noticed back then was that there was a strong focus on what was going on in Canada, especially with its historical communities. If you remember in 2017, Canada had the 150 celebration, and we had a lot of people that say, why are we celebrating 150 years while the indigenous community have been neglected for 150 years? So it was almost like a stark reminder to sort of say, what is there to celebrate? And I
Okay.
think you noticed from 2017 to 2018, Black Lives Matter took off in the
Yeah.
United States and also in Canada. In 2019, you could see this appreciation of saying, hang on a moment, we may have left some people behind, but COVID was really the eye-opener to sort of
Yeah.
say, oh, we left maybe, the nurses behind.
Yeah.
We've left, folks that are working in frontline
So it's
services.
not just about race, it's about
Yes.
certain groups of people that we have to take care of
Yes.
as a whole, right?
Yes.
It's not just Black Lives Matter. It's
Yeah.
like the nurses, the doctors, the
Yes.
teachers, you
Yes.
know. And that's a nice insight because sometimes we think very much on groups and
Yes.
racial divisions,
Yeah.
but sometimes even occupational
Yes.
things we have to think
We have
about.
to think about them. And the
Okay.
interesting thing about it is that if you think of someone who is affected by race, but also affected by poverty, now it's not just about race anymore. Poverty now is also involved. Now you could find someone is impacted by race, but also socioeconomic condition, but also into historical trauma. And that's something that we've been discovering since Black Lives Matter in 2020, that you cannot find someone and just think like, oh, they're acting this way because of this,
So many
it could be so many
probable
circumstances.
reasons. Okay.
And now we're starting to realize that, hang on a moment, this community may not be as employed as much. Why is that the case? And then you find that they've been excluded from the workplace, that they've really shifted their interest from working as meaningful citizens as we've come to attach that. And I think those interdisciplinary connections started to become apparent, but it was apparent to people that really started to make the connections. Because for many of us,
look
we're
at
like,
it, right?
hang on a moment, like, it's just these people that, and that's really where discrimination started to emerge,
Yeah.
whereby you write someone off based on a single circumstance to say, oh, they're not working, they're probably lazy, or,
You can't generalize like that.
no.
Maybe there are no opportunities. Everything.
Yes.
And it's not just for immigrants.
Yeah.
It's also for the locals as well.
It is.
So
Yes.
it's. I think you're right. We need to look at this as a bigger picture,
Yes.
not just. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going to very nice discussions,
Yeah.
but coming in 2017 to Halifax,
Yeah.
how was it for you, for a predominantly, I'm sure,
Yes.
white community
Yes.
coming in as a person from Uganda?
Yeah.
How did it feel? How was living here like for you?
It was very different. And it was very different in a number of ways. One of the things I remember mentioning to one of my friends in 2017 was that Halifax, the streets of Halifax was one place that you could see where you could be anonymous, but be visible at the same time.
What do you
Now,
mean?
I'll tell you the difference.
Yeah.
For instance, for instance, considering where you immigrated from, you could walk into the streets of Halifax and nobody would recognize you.
Okay.
But at the same time, based on your characteristics, someone can notice who you are.
Yeah.
And the difference with that is often how you're treated in a place where you're anonymous. Now, if you're in a community where you've lived for 7 years,
Yeah.
everybody knows you by name, everybody knows what you do, your public reputation is clear and it's positive. If you live in a place that you're new, you don't get the small benefits that
Yeah.
we guarantee everyone and give them to. And you'll notice it in how language is used around people that do not have much. So you'd find people that are dealing with homelessness, and it's like those that are dealing with substance use. Nobody talks anything positive about these communities because they're visible, but also
But they're
anonymous.
invisible.
Yes, and anonymous at the
Yeah.
same time.
So
So it's almost like you don't give them the benefit of being human or the benefit of being someone.
Did you
that,
feel that way?
Yes. And that for me was really eye-opening because coming from Uganda, where everybody knew me by name,
Exactly.
now I could be entirely by myself and nobody would even know who it
Notice,
was.
yeah.
But then the flip side of that was that someone could mention something like, you immigrants should go back to your country.
Yeah.
Now at the time, I was like, I didn't come to stay. As a matter of fact, I am here to complete my
Yeah.
program.
And I'm leaving.
And I'll be on the plane leaving as soon as I can.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, hang on a moment, like, if I didn't come to stay and you still want me to go, then do I really want to be a part of this space?
Yeah.
And that for me was really where I started to really start to see that there were people that had been left on the margins and their marginalization was now leading to my own marginalization, which was almost like, hang on a moment, we are on the same side. We are dealing with the same limitations.
things. It's just that we're different.
Yes, but now we're actually taking on each other rather
Yeah.
than saying, hang on a moment, how did we end up on the left side of the field where there was less opportunity or there were less resources or there was less opportunity to really move ourselves
Yeah,
up to a certain
yeah,
place
you're
of
right.
being. And those are the moments that I was like, we need to build those bridges.
Bridge the
with those-
gaps.
yes.
Because whether you're an immigrant or you're local,
Yeah.
those bridges have to be built.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving to New Brunswick, what
Yeah.
made you decide? Okay. Yeah, are you just adventurous or what? So what made you decide to go to New Brunswick?
Well, at the time, I did apply for a job when I was actually going to Ontario on a road trip. So basically, I was driving around with my friends on a July summer day, and I saw this opportunity, and I was like, hang on a moment. I really need to think about this one and apply. And just like most good things that come to you, I applied, I forgot about it. They reached out and said, oh, would like to have you.
Wow.
I was like, let's have a chat. They were like, can you come at the beginning of September? I was like, give me some time. I'll see how this goes. And it was initially, it was like, there's the offer. And I came to New Brunswick on a 6 months contract.
Okay.
And the idea was that by the end of that 6 months, I didn't really know what would happen. And I didn't know exactly how things would play out. Interestingly, though, COVID hit.
Oh,
And
this
when
was
COVID
right the
hit,
time. Okay.
There was nowhere else to go. So New Brunswick was home for me by choice, but also by
By
circumstance.
force. So how do you compare New Brunswick versus Nova Scotia? Is there a difference? Which place makes you more feel like its own?
Well, one thing I've noticed living in Nova Scotia and living in New Brunswick is that there is a lot of similarities.
Okay.
If you look at the aspirations of the people, they want the same things. They want to be included. They want to participate. They want an equal pie of Canada, if you want to call it that way, because for some time we've been kind of left, sitting on the
Maritimes,
curb.
yeah.
Like we've been sitting on the curb in terms of how we think of our nation. The other thing that I noticed as a difference was that there is a willingness to reconcile in Nova Scotia. There's a willingness to reconcile with the past. There's a willingness to reconcile with people that have been left out. There's a willingness to engage with institutions that have left other people out. That is something that I'm yet to see, and I'm hoping to see.
And that's why we're here.
Yes.
That's why we're doing what we're doing, so we can
Yes.
do the things.
Yeah.
So tell me about your journey in New Brunswick,
Yeah.
because you mentioned something earlier about the good thing that happened last year.
Yeah. So last year I had the privilege of marrying, like the woman of my life that I
Oh.
met, 4 years ago, and she had been living in New Brunswick for 10 years. So she had come here in 2013, actually now a little over 11, and I was always asking, I was like, how are you still in this place? And she's like, I've met so many people that have built me as the person that I've become. I have built a community here. I feel like I have so much to give, but also I have had so much that I've received. And it made me really start to think of how has this community built these
Another
newcomers,
person,
another
yeah.
person, people that would come with a suitcase, people who would come with a few belongings, and who would just
Yeah.
come with a dream for a better life for themselves and their families. And it made me realize that there were people in this community that were almost like the person that waters the plants while you are away from your home.
Yeah.
And it's like, you may be gone for 3 months, you might be gone for 2 weeks, but if you come back and notice the difference, if they were away, well, them doing that the whole time, the difference is stark, because one is a dead plant and another one is a thriving one. And it made me realize that there are people that were doing that work, really helping people thrive. And I
Yeah.
wanted that kind of work. I wanted to be in the work that I can enable people thrive, so that they are like a bird that now they know how to
Yeah.
fly, and you never have to think of them anymore.
Yeah, teach them how to fish
Yes.
rather
And
than give them fish.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that idea, and that's something I'm very passionate about too.
Yeah.
So, having been here this so many years,
Yes.
do you now consider Canada as your home, or do you still think of someday I'm going to go back to Uganda?
Well, that was always a question in the back of my mind, because it was almost like I have over 3 generations of family members in Uganda.
Yeah.
And I've been living in Canada for 7 years. I've also built a community here that I rely on so much. But the thing that I noticed about it is that the thing that not many people talk about with immigration is that there's a third place for a person. And this is where, if you return home, in your country of birth, you may not be considered fully as the person of that homeland. And then when you're living here, you may not be considered fully as a person of that homeland. And the thing for me that I noticed about Canada was that there were all these people who were almost like third country citizens, where they were looking for a community of their own. It wasn't Iraq, or it wasn't Indonesia, or it wasn't Colombia. And they were still finding it with the people that met also from another part of the world. So, and that made conversations like we're having almost so natural, because it's like, hang on a moment, I've known you like I've known you my life, because we have so much in common, even though some of those are not spoken.
Even if we're from different countries, right? The pathways, the things we've experienced are
and
so
also
common.
like the natural curiosity to find out the things that we've experienced. Because if I'm honest, not many people will come to you and say, you know what, Pamela, can you tell me a little bit more about your journey coming to this community? How was it like at the start? What have you learned
What did you
in
do?
hindsight?
What kind of pathways?
Yes.
I mean, there's a natural curiosity, especially for immigrants
Yes.
among themselves, to like learn
Yes.
how other people, and that's why I'm doing this. I really just want to be able to tell the people, not just the locals, but immigrants like ourselves, like, what did we go through? It was it hard, easy, whatever?
Yeah.
Did family members ever come and join you here? Did they ever like think, okay, you said, it's okay here, it's okay here, you don't need an umbrella. So, did they?
Well, in my family, no, they didn't. And one of the things I'd always wanted, and I remember talking to my mom and saying, my graduation is coming up, and you have to come, because I won't be having a few more graduations down the line, because at best, this might be the only one on the
This is
table.
the only one.
And I remember her saying, you know what, I would really love to come, but it's too far away, and the way of life is so different. And it made me realize that there were things about the way of life in Uganda. For instance, my mom is a businesswoman. Now, she will get up, she'll, jump on a vehicle or a motorcycle and go to her work and all of
And
this.
you can't do that.
And here, it's almost like she would have to align herself with, the public transit system.
Your schedule.
My
whatever.
schedule, like the places are open this time.
But just to visit?
And, well, I thought it would be that easy, but it was not easy to persuade my mom to visit. Now, what we did was the opposite, was to visit her. And then...
Has Inda met?
Yes. So she did. And actually, when we went last May, she was so delighted, because she had never been anywhere in Africa. She had never visited any of my family members.
Africa.
Well,
I want to go. I really want to go. I have a lot of Nigerian friends now, and I've been hearing a lot about Africa. So one of my bucket lists is to go there.
I mean, you should. And one thing that surprised me was how much Inda fell in love with Uganda and with Africa too. And I think, like, we share the same experience. There is also this appreciation there that, you know what, we are the same people, divided by a waterway, by a border, by this.
Same everything.
Yes, and I think that for me, the more I live away and grow older, the more I realize that we are really similar in so many ways. It's just that sometimes we get carried away with the differences
instead of the similarities. Okay, last question. If you were to change, go back, will you do it over again? Will you move?
I would. And I have to say, arguably, the decision to leave Uganda and come here was one of the most important decisions that I made. And I think it gave me this assurance and confidence in people, that you could have the confidence and faith in strangers to look out for you, which is different coming from a community, because you trust people because you know them. You know them. But here, it's because you know that there's a goodness in human nature that you cannot enforce by giving them a gift or giving money, them this or this. It's like there's a natural giving that the givers are willing to offer. And for me, I think I would not have appreciated that. And if I had not left. So I think, looking back, I would do the same. And I would hope that I meet even more interesting people along the way and just make it a fun
thing, like what we're doing. With that inspirational message, Thank you for joining me today, Ivan.
Oh, thank you so
and
much.
with that, see you on the next episode of The Moving Truth with Pam. Bye.